As you read the New Testament, you often see references to tax collectors in the ministry of Jesus. And so I want you to understand tax collectors, who they were, what their role was in Jewish society in Jesus' day, because as we understand tax collectors, that will help us to understand more about Jesus' ministry and his mission. So let's start by looking at the tax burden in ancient Judea. Under Roman occupation, the Jews paid a religious tax to the Jewish authorities, which was used to maintain the temple. But they also paid taxes to the Romans, often collected by very harsh means. The Romans collected an income tax from everybody, and they also collected customs duties. Those were fees paid to do commerce. For example, a merchant selling items might have to pay a heavy duty on the value of that item that they were selling. They also paid tolls to use roads or bridges or to enter certain towns. Now, if you take the cumulative tax burden, add it all up, then it was estimated that it was at least 30 to 40% of what the people earned, and it was probably even higher than that. And so the tax burden in ancient Judea was pretty significant, and that's what gave tax collectors such a significant role. And that's even more so when you consider how taxes were collected. The Roman taxes were collected by a class of independent contractors. They were usually Jewish people who worked in close collaboration with the hated Romans. And what they would do is these tax collectors would pay the Roman government a franchise fee for the right to collect taxes in their name. And then anything that they collected above and beyond what was owed to the actual Roman government, well, that was pure gravy. That was where they made their money. That was their profit. And so you could see how this would lend itself to some very abusive practices. For example, if you're the tax collector, you could assess the goods that were being traded at whatever amount you wanted to assess them. And so you could make an assessment that was way too high, or arbitrarily high, and the merchant had no recourse and no appeal to any higher authority. They just had to pay. Another thing that tax collectors did to make money is that they would threaten trumped up charges of smuggling and then extort hush money from the merchants to keep from going to the Roman government to report this smuggling. And so merchants would pay whatever they had to pay to stay out of jail, even though the charges were not accurate or not true. And so you can see that the way that taxes were collected in the ancient world led to the particular position that tax collectors held in Jewish society. Tax collectors were despised by their fellow Jews. For one thing, they were an ever-present reminder of foreign oppression. And what's more, they used cruel methods to become wealthy at the expense of their fellow countrymen. And then their work required them to spend a lot of time collaborating with Gentiles who were considered to be spiritually unclean. And so for all these reasons, tax gatherers, tax collectors were seen as the worst possible sinners at the very bottom rung. Socially, they were rejected and shunned. Politically, they were seen as traitors to their nation. And then religiously, they were excommunicated as apostates. And so it was the worst possible black mark upon a man to be a tax collector in that society at that time. Tax collectors were not allowed to hold any kind of responsible public office. They were not allowed to give testimony in Jewish legal courts. And the rabbis even debated about whether it was possible for a tax collector ever to experience genuine repentance. And so given the place that tax collectors held in Jewish society, it's very remarkable that Jesus actually reached out and embraced tax collectors like Zacchaeus and Matthew. It shows the power of redemption in Jesus Christ, that there's no class of people that's beyond the scope of the grace and the mercy of God. Jesus reached out even to the very lowest and most despised people in society with the mercy of God, and they began to follow him, and their lives were changed.